Around 6 months ago, I made a video looking at one of my rapid games, going through exactly what I was thinking so you guys could see inside of the mind of somebody rated 2,200 ELO. Since then, I've crossed the 2,300 ELO mark and peaked at over 100 ELO higher rated than I was. So in today's video, we're going to be doing something very similar so you guys can see how my thought process has improved over the last 6 months. If you'd like to see the last video that I made, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Also, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see another video like this if I ever reach 2,400 ELO. But aside from that, let's get right into the game. So we have this game against a 2,300 rated player, and I'll tell you a bit more about the game when we get to some thinking, because the game starts off quite quickly. We go with a Queen's Gambit and a Slav defense here. Knight F3 mainline Slav, and we get all of the knights out. And we get this A6 move. I think it's called the Chameleon variation. I didn't really give much thought to it because I thought it was absolutely nonsense, but the idea is to go b5. I just play g3, which is completely fine. But the idea is b5, and after b5, taking on d5 is a little bit awkward, or at least I thought it was, because of b4. Kicking the knight away, and then you forfeit rights to the d4 or d5 pawn anyway. It turns out that after b4, you just play knight a4, and you're doing quite well. You can land your knight on c5, and there's really nothing to worry about. But I guess I kind of overcomplicated this. I haven't studied this at all. So I ended up taking on b5, which is not bad. But I also follow it up with a very slow move. In my head, I think that b4 is good. But in reality, I just did have that queen a4 check move, or even knight a4, and then you can go ahead and target that b4 pawn long term. Both bishops are fianchettoed, and I castle, and then knight d7 follows. I immediately identify the fact that my bishop is going to be very weak, my dark squared bishop at least. Because my pawns are all on dark squares, I kind of want to trade it off very early. That doesn't mean that his bishop is going to be bad. Of course, I could just play bishop f4, and then the bishops would be traded, but I really want to make this imbalance and try to prove that my knight is going to be better than his bishop. And I'm going to land my knight on e5. And after bishop d6, I can anchor in my knights with f4. Knight d3 maybe is slightly better. Again, the bishop is looking at that dark squared pawn chain. The fianchettoed structure is really difficult for a dark squared bishop to kind of attack the king with. And he plays g6. I assume that he's worried about me pushing f5 myself. But pushing f5 right now would have resulted in me losing a pawn, but I guess he just didn't want his king opened up. Quickly looking at knight takes f7 ideas, but because of the pawn on e2, my king or my queen really can't get into the game to support that attack, or really anything. If that pawn was off the board, maybe I would have some inroads, but I really don't right now. My opponent in this game, by the way, has peaked at around 2,500 ELO, which was really, really interesting. I think just a couple of weeks ago he was around 2,400, but he's gone down significantly here. And I'm also on a really bad run of games going into this game. I think I have got 4 losses and 1 win in my last 5, so not the greatest run of form. My opponent castles here. I really want to play h4, h5, but if the reason that you want to do that is because if the knight takes, then you have knight d7. But the issue is, at any point, black can just take my knight with their bishop, and then I've just lost the pawn. Sure, I have some open files, but I really don't think this is amazing. Yeah, you can just see I'm putting that on the board here. So I end up going with bishop f3 to support that h5 square. I'm also considering some king g2 ideas to connect my rook with the h1 square. So after h4, h5, there's an open h file that my rook can occupy. Because after h4 and knight e4, I don't really want to take with my knight because then my bishop is kind of stuck, even though that pawn is maybe a target. I want to defend my backwards g3 pawn with my king whilst opening up my rook. He plays rook d8, which is slightly slow, but you can see the idea is obviously just protecting the d7 square. And I'm more than happy to just throw h4 on the board here. After knight e4, I plan on going king g2, defending that pawn on g3. And I'm worried about this f6 idea, so knight e4, f6, knight g3, king g7. Okay, I've lost my train of thought there. I don't know what I'm calculating. I'll put it on the board. Basically, there's this really long line that I was thinking of if he does try and go f6 too early, where I thought that maybe his kind of whole structure would be far too weak. everything would get traded off, and then at the end of the day, I would have some big attacking chances. A lot of that calculation was kind of giving the benefit of the doubt that black would play bad moves, but it was just to give some visualization 10 moves time. But he never ends up going for this f6 idea and trying to drive the knight into e4. Instead, he prefers to drop his bishop back and get his other rook into the game. I guess kind of just accepting that that bishop on a8 is just going to be bad the whole game, which it does. It really doesn't get in. Yeah, the bishop goes back to a8, but now I have rook h1 ideas. I have h5 ideas. At any point, the light squared bishop probably should not take that knight in the center because it just opens up my rook. And even though I have a slight time disadvantage here, I feel like white is the only one that can play this position for a win. I don't remember what the evaluation is. I think it's something like +1. But you can see here I'm happy to sacrifice a pawn. He plays king g7. I want rook h1 now because I see rook h1. If he preemptively plays rook h8, I can play h6. And that doesn't win anything, but it locks the rook out of the game completely. And now black is playing just without a rook. It's stuck on h8. So that's the idea. It's very common actually in the Sicilian Dragon, where obviously the black pieces would suffer the same tactic, where the rook gets locked in the corner. In these, usually they're opposite side castling positions, but rook c7 is played. That explains the weird rook a7 move that you saw before. And now I'm thinking of queen d2. Queen d2, rook c8, takes, and I was thinking f5. But the problem that I really kind of realized is that after queen d2, knight e4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and f5, there is e3 check, and that bishop suddenly comes to life on that square, on a8, and the king's on the same diagonal, of course. So maybe in hindsight, I should have shifted my king to a different square, but I guess then if you go king f2, knight e4 comes with a check. Yeah, now I'm thinking, okay, queen e3 is actually a decent possibility. But I feel like by that point, I've made too many commitments in the position, and my threat is actually quite defendable. Here I'm just calculating what if f5 first, but I don't really like any of it. I feel like, especially if I allow d takes e4, not only do I have a pawn on d4, which could be very weak, I'm also just activating the bishop on a8 for no reason. I think I do end up going for this idea anyway with queen d2, because at the end of the day, you're not making a huge commitment as long as you don't go all the way down with the line. And like the rook on h1, you have to justify this somehow. You can't just, sit around and do nothing. I'm really not sure what a better move would have been. We are going to analyze this game at the end, though. We've got a live analysis, so not something that I've looked at before. And my opponent goes for a weird move here, knight g8, and I felt like this must be wrong, but of course he's just looking at my idea, where now queen h6 check is no longer a thing. I can't do that anymore. But I take on g6. I feel like now is the right time, and I'm thinking a problem that could arise is f6. So the way I fix that is by playing queen d3. So f6 is of course never possible because then queen takes g6. But I kind of just don't realize that if I play queen d3... Did I play queen d3? I think I did. Yeah, I'm hesitating with rook h2 here. But I'm thinking that, okay, f6 is kind of a big problem that I don't want to deal with. But the problem with queen d3 is that there is just knight f6 back. And then the rook is happy to go to h8. And then everything's going to be traded off the h-file, and suddenly it's a strong h-file for black as well. I'm just quickly calculating if bishop takes. I don't think it changes much. But realistically, I should have gone rook h2 here, and then if knight f6 then I have rook c h1, and now rook h8 is no longer possible because I would take with the rook, and then the queen would have to take, and then you're just losing a rook and your queen. So that's what I should have gone for, and I kind of let black off the hook here because now knight f6 is available. Of course, they're not going to play f6. I was considering what I would do in this kind of mating sequence. I think after king f8, you would go rook h8. But the knight can just track back now, and this is really not something that I want to deal with. I end up going for a g4 in this position, I think. kind of realizing that I have to make some kind of progress, otherwise the rooks are going to be traded, and I actually have kind of a weird pawn structure that maybe isn't even favorable in the endgame. So really, when you're on these attacks like this, you always need to be careful. Okay, if my opponent finds a way to trade material, am I actually losing the endgame? And I think in this position I may just be worse in the endgame because of my weird pawn on e2, the weird extension and setup of my kingside pawns as well, and black has advanced queenside pawns, which took some early space. But there's an exchange of rooks made. My rook is now very active and has full control over the h-file, but I'm just thinking maybe rook c8, and then I've got some problems. But again, I've got these g4 ideas in the back of my head. So if g4, I can play g5. I can kind of lock that knight out of the game. I mean, the f6 square is just so crucial in black's game right now. The knight really has nowhere else good to go. You'll actually notice in a few moves that knight does go to an awkward square. I mean, the move knight d7 is not terrible by any means. But yeah, we'll see what happens here. It's actually a very interesting conclusion to the game. Again, my opponent is not taking too long on his moves. I'm actually thinking of, at various points in this line, to sacrifice the bishop. For example, let's say bishop takes d5 and then pawn takes d5, and then I have this queen h3 move that I thought was maybe working. But of course, if bishop takes d5 is check, so you would have to sacrifice it on e4, and then knight takes e4, and then queen h3, something like that, and then you could have these ideas, but I just didn't think it was working. And I think that's what I'm calculating on the board right now. There's also these queen b1 ideas. So for example, if g5, knight d7, I thought queen b1. But there's just too many problems with the position. I'll show it on the board just because it's a little difficult to visualize in the time scramble that I'm in, closing in on under 2 minutes left on my clock. But yeah, queen b1 ideas I just didn't really like because queen h1 is obviously the long-term idea. But you want your queen in front of your rook in that battery, not the other way around, so I just didn't really like it. And here you can see I'm calculating this bishop e4 idea, sacrificing the bishop to get my queen over to h3. Of course, if at any point the bishop on a8 was to check my king, I would have played king g3, and this is about to happen actually, where he drives his knight in. I really thought that knight d7 was the correct move there. I thought that knight e4 was completely wrong. Of course, if you take the pawn back with your knights, something like queen c6 might come. Actually, I think queen c1 is a little bit better. But the knight is just pinned to your king, right? You shouldn't be taking with your knight there because that's a crucial piece of your attack, and the bishop on a8 is suddenly coming to life and stopping that knight from remaining in the game. So you really want to keep your knight on c3 here, blocking the queen from getting in, and there's no useful discoveries for black. You know, e3 check, king g3, and the attack stops. Of course, there is a queen h6 check threatened right now with queen h8 checkmate to follow. I should have played queen h6 here. There's an intermezzo forcing the black king to g8. I didn't think that was a difference. I thought, okay, check, king g8, but then you can't checkmate. So I thought there was no difference. I should just take the bishop now. But the difference is, after you take, the king can go to f8 and escape the checkmate. Of course, it's still completely winning for white. But my opponent checks me first with e6. He's got 6 minutes to calculate as well. Definitely should have spent a little bit more time on this game. But then he plays a very easy move for me to respond with. Maybe one of the worst moves on the board. Actually, probably equally the worst move on the board because it does blunder mate in one. And he plays rook g8, and I play queen h6 checkmate. And we'll go over to my live analysis. I really don't think I played well that game. I think I'm maybe not lucky to win it, but I think my win comes from my opponent playing badly. He played a 54% accuracy middle game. Let's look at some of the key moments. We'll go through the opening. Queen's Gambit. Played a Slav. I know what I'm doing here. This was weird. Apparently this is called the Chameleon. I thought the idea was to play b5, and then I kind of just allowed it with g3, and then I realized that I can't really take in the center. Apparently b3. I didn't see b3. C takes d5 actually works somehow. I would have thought that this doesn't. Knight a4. C takes d5, and I guess, wow, this is just very strong. Bishop f4. Okay, I'm gonna have to study this. I've never seen this before. So what would he have done if I didn't? So if I play this, what is the best move? Is it just to take back? I guess you just transpose, right? Okay, so we end up getting the same thing. So b5 I took here, and you end up transposing into the same thing anyway, okay? a3, I realized that this wasn't necessary. I thought bishop g2, and then I could go here, and then the knight could swing around this way. So I realized that a3 was just a waste of a move. I was just giving too much credit to this b4 move. Queen a4 check was actually what I was thinking, but I think knight a4 is a little bit better. Knight a4 here. Sorry, e6 for black. And then I guess you just continue, like bishop f4, stuff like that. But we didn't go for that. We went for a3, just slow. They played e6, bishop g2. I could kind of feel this game would just go in a slow direction, which is why I was fine to play a3. Bishop b7 there, castles. I wouldn't have done any of this differently. Bishop g5. I realized that my bishop really sucks. This is going to be a dark square pawn chain everywhere, and because he's stolen some space on the queen side, I really didn't think it was likely that my bishop could come over this way. I also didn't think that b4, bishop b2 was going to be good, because I kind of wanted to keep the center closed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to create the first imbalance of the game, and I also get to put my knight up here, which I really liked. Bishop d6. Apparently, knight d3 is a little bit better, but I don't mind f4. It's just very logical. g6 was, I assume... because he's not fianchettoing anything, I assume he wants to stop f5 and not have me break open everything, even though it does lose a pawn. Maybe he was just being a little bit prophylactic. g6, rook c1. I was kind of spending too long on this move, so I just played a move that was logical, and rook c1 was logical, also the best move. Castles, bishop f3. I really wanted to go for this h4, h5 idea, but The problem was h4, h5 was relying on the fact that the knight can't take because of knight d7, but at any points, like let's say h4, and then I get another move, h5, he's just going to take here first and then recapture. So I didn't like that at all. So I went for bishop f3 to support h4. Rook d8 is a mistake because of e3 apparently. It doesn't really do anything, this move. It doesn't, like, this isn't active at all. I guess he wants to stop knight d7 ideas, which I thought was pretty intuitive. h4, I think it's fine. It's a miss, but it's still equal. He goes rook a7. This was really weird. Yeah, h5 is really good now. I didn't go for h5 straight away. Yeah, so rook a7, I'm not really sure what the idea is. I guess he just thinks that this bishop is really bad and wants to tuck it away in the corner and make room for other pieces. I went with king g2 because my idea with h5 was, okay, sure, I'm like cracking everything open, but h5 doesn't have anything unless you've got more pieces to kind of come into the game. So apparently like bishop a8, and what was I supposed to do? Is it's not going to be, it shouldn't be king g2 now, right? Now things like e3 or h takes g. I don't really know. I guess if you play king g2, he gets the opportunity to play h5. Yeah, h5 is one of the top engine moves, so playing king g2, it's slightly inaccurate, but it just allows the move h5 to come. He plays bishop a8, so I assume h5 is fine now, okay. King g7. Apparently this is really bad. I thought, okay, so I played rook h1 first. I did come up with queen d3. Queen d3 is what the engine wants. It also thinks that rook h1 is completely fine. Rook c7 I thought did nothing because I'm just never going to move this knight. Just kind of gonna keep it there, and then my rook's gonna vacate this file as well. I played queen d2 now, and the idea is we'll put it on the board. If bishop b7, I wanted to play f5. Or maybe not f5, maybe I wanted to play h takes g first. And then after this maybe, now we have f5. I thought that this was maybe really good. Yeah, okay, so this is completely winning. Of course, you have to play rook h8 now to stop this mating threat. And now you just go takes, not takes, rook h1, and the queen is kind of stuck between defending mate and looking at this protected rook. So that was the idea, at least, with queen d2. Let's continue. He played knight g8, which I thought looked wrong, but I couldn't figure out how to punish it. I thought that taking first would be a good start, and then I wanted to play, apparently, rook h3 immediately. Ah, okay. So you want to play rook h3 immediately, and then if he plays knight f6, I'm not actually sure what the difference is. Rook ch1, but I would have thought I just had this. Or just black has this. Ah, but now this actually works. There's a tactic that I looked... Oh, actually, no, never mind. This is stupid. I don't know what I'm thinking. Of course that doesn't work. Okay. So, yeah, rook h3 would have been a little bit better. He plays knight f6 now. And after rook h2, he's kind of one tempo faster. He gets back. I go rook ch1. Apparently, taking again was better. Taking again is better because of the same thing. Is it just rook h1? No, it's queen e3, and we kind of threaten it again. I would assume we're threatening rook h1, the queen moves away, we're threatening f5 again, and if you take in the center, of course I'm going to check, and if you run back instead of taking with the center, I think just taking here is probably good enough, and creating a backwards pawn, my rook gets into the game. So that's why that's slightly wrong. Rook takes h2, I take back, rook c8, now I'm coming with g4. Queen c7, I was kind of unsure with this g5 move, because I would have thought g5, just knight d7, and black is completely fine here. Not sure why he didn't play that. Apparently queen d1 now. Okay. What's the difference between queen d1 and queen b1? What is queen b1? Knight takes e5, takes... and bishop here. Right, okay, so this is the problem. But how does queen d1 solve that? Let's say the same thing now. Is it just queen h1? But we had queen h1 before. Maybe bishop there wasn't wrong on queen b1. What is the difference? Oh my god, you sack the bishop to save mate. And you get 2 pawns for the bishop, and with this very strong pawn structure, the bad bishop, my king's a little bit weak, it probably is fine for black. Wow. So I play g5, and he goes, I just assumed that this knight e4 was wrong, it didn't feel right. Bishop takes here, and then queen h3 is very important, because I think if you take, you just lose. Because, let's go queen b7. No, not queen b7. I thought pinning the piece was the right thing to do. Queen c1. I have no idea what that does. Oh, queen c1. Oh, right, that was queen b8. Queen c1 now. And I still don't quite see it. I guess the idea is rook c2. And your pieces are just, you can't abandon your knights, like, everything is just too tangled if you take that, which is why I went queen h3. I knew that if here I would go king g3, bishop takes. Oh, I had mate in 6. Yeah, I'm not sure, okay. Oh, so I guess forcing him onto the back rank first and then taking. So I didn't think there was a difference, actually. I thought that takes, but I guess takes, now there's this. Yeah, so yeah, you should do the intermezzo. Okay, I didn't actually think of that. I also didn't really have too much time to think of it. He went e3 check, king g3, rook g8 was stupid. I do wonder how the game would have progressed if I did this there. I was thinking here, 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 and probably queen f5 check. Queen f6 check. But then he can go... Oh no, king d7, we just take the free pawn, right? And we're completely winning. Here, I mean, we can even grab another pawn on our way out. King b7, he's like kind of safe, but take another pawn and we're completely winning. Very nice.